Hi everyone, Language Thingy Barrier Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Haru Nemuri album, HARUTOSYURA. I hope I said that right. This is the debut full-length album from Yokohama singer Haru Nemuri, who built up to this release with a few singles and mini-albums. And while her new record here is billed as a J-pop release, this album is actually so much more. For the most part, it doesn't really deliver the ultra-bright, dancey, and synthetic sounds that we typically expect from the J-pop genre, though there are certainly elements of that popping up here and there. Of course, these are also mixed with elements of hip-hop and post-hardcore, noise pop, and art rock. So to label this as a J-pop album, it's not too far off, even though artistically I kind of find more parallels between this record and Japan's very long and rich history of experimental, noisy, underground rock and punk music. I certainly find more common ground between this album and that than I do a Koto or a Perfume or a Kyari Pamyu Pamyu. Honest to God, there are drum and guitar parts on this album that sound like they could have been lifted straight out of a La Dispute album, but now they just kind of have a Japanese singer on top. And of course there are more weird compositional detours throughout the instrumental too. Occasionally that does take away from the novelty of the record a little bit, leaving me feeling like I'm just kind of hearing something that I've already heard before a bunch of times, just under a different genre label with a different singer on top of it, namely on the song Lost Planet. However, it's really a lot of the experimentation, the pop rock elements, and the rapping on these tracks that really puts Haru and this record into a category of its own. The rapping on this thing is typically very hurried and tense. There is rhythm to it, but a lot of the time it kind of comes off as spoken word. There are a few cuts on here as well that see Haru quickly transitioning from this fevered rapping to just straight screaming her brains out, like on NARASHITE and Rock and Roll wa SHINANAI. Surprisingly, the language barrier didn't really hit me that hard on this record either. I found it entertaining right from the first track, because there are a lot of very diverse rock instrumentals hanging in the background on this thing that are pretty dynamic, very well recorded and mixed, passionately performed. There are a lot of sweet melodies and interesting chord progressions to speak of too, but still, the melodies and vocal refrains on this record are pretty catchy regardless. And translating the lyrics from Japanese to English led to some really interesting results too. I caught what felt like a lot of very surreal imagery and word choices. There are a couple of songs on here where the rapping or the vocal delivery is much more subtle and understated, leading to maybe a bit of a lull in the album, namely on the song 19, but a very similar vocal delivery on the 8th track of the album leads to an incredibly hypnotic and almost sensual experience. There are also a few moments on the record where I think the band kind of cuts the full potential of a song off with a very abrupt ending, like on the track Underground, which kicks off like this amazing euphoric piece of 8-bit synth pop rock with these super bright chimey chords and these incredibly moody and intimate rapped vocals. I wish the song went on some of the artistic and instrumental detours that many of the other tracks on here do, like the surprise bit in the second leg of the title track on this thing where suddenly the instrumental starts speeding up as if the track is caught on a cassette tape that is moving its way to full fast forward mode before the stop button just kind of clicks and ends the whole thing. Then bringing us into a final instrumental bridge where the guitars get kind of noisy and distorted and sour, dissonant, some anthemic soloing as well, and a very climactic final refrain. While there are a few tracks on this thing that I think could have used a bit of building out, overall I find the brevity of this record to be an asset. Sans the remixes at the end of this thing, the whole record kind of rounds out at about 37 minutes, which causes Haru and her band to pack these 3-minute songs with a lot of different ideas. Also, there are a handful of short interlude cuts throughout the record that kind of introduce various tracks. There are plenty of highlights on this thing from front to back, like the blistering introduction, "Make more noise of you!" with driving guitars, multi-tracked shouty vocals. The guitar tone on this thing is really brittle and trebly and burning, fiery. The drums are incredibly crisp, they really pop in the mix. Haru's expressive rapping on the track is excellent. NARASHITE that I mentioned earlier in the review is easily one of the catchiest tracks on the entire record, the distortion little English nod there in hook is incredible. The 7th track on here is a pretty fantastic blend of synth pop and anthemic alt rock with this super sticky a chorus chant. The 11th cut on here is the first song that introduced me to this project, and it is this very tense, beautiful, and strange piece of piano rock with these persistent glistening chords. It's incredibly dramatic. Haru lays all of these shouty vocal overdubs on the track that just makes her rapping feel even more just anxious and nail-biting. It's really an emotionally potent listen no matter what language you speak. The rock and roll closer is a fantastic and fiery ending to the entire thing. And overall, this record is a pretty fantastic and versatile pop rock album with lots of very noisy and experimental bits to kind of keep things interesting and cutting edge. Not to mention Haru's unlikely rap delivery on this thing, kind of making the album as special as it is and separating her from many other artists in the J-pop field. Aside from a good handful of tracks that just left me wanting more or just felt a little underwhelming in comparison to others, this is a really solid record. It's also a reminder to me of what makes modern music so interesting, that you can get these forward-thinking musical and stylistic blends of various genres assembled in a really unique way, executed incredibly well, written very well, recorded very well, and then tossed out there onto the internet for unsuspecting musical spelunkers to kind of stumble upon and discover something really cool. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. And over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Yeah, that's what you can do. Anthony Fantano, Haru Nemuri, forever.